Hi everybody, it's Sam. Today is April 2nd, 2015, and I'm doing a video. I'm going to do my daily vlog later, but today I'd like to do a video about more about my story. I mean, not my whole life story from 1988 on, but just a little bit about my story from like when I came to Chicago, how I came to Chicago, and where I am now, so people have an understanding of what's going on, because some of you guys know some of my story. I started my channel in 2012, putting up videos when I had moved to Friedman Place in Chicago, which is assisted living. I don't know what it's called now because they have a new director. When I was there, it was a supportive living facility for the blind and visually impaired, and I did a lot of videos about that, about why I went there, and you guys can access those videos. They're still on my channel. When I came here and when I was thinking about doing YouTube videos, again, I wanted to make a new channel and get rid of the old one or something, because I just felt like that part of my life was not done, but I don't know, I couldn't really relate to it as much, and I wanted a new channel, but kind of like I have so much of a new life here that I felt didn't really relate to my old life, but now I think it's good to like have everything together and show that like people's lives can change like dramatically, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. So where you guys saw me was when I was at Friedman Place, and I was there from June 2012 to November 13th, 2013. So I spent a good year and a half there, and it was a wonderful year and a half there, and I never regret the decision to move out. I feel really lucky that I was living at one of the only places specifically for the blind in the country that's an assisted living. It made me think about how much we need something like that more, and it made me think about wanting to talk to other people who might be interested in having assisted living, or a system where you would have studio apartments or rooms where people could have like a good level of independence in terms of their capacities and like capabilities, and be encouraged for as much as possible to reach their goals, and also have the support they need, whether it's day-to-day mental health support, or if they need help administering medications, or if they need help because they have a physical disability that affects mobility, CP, like ability to do daily living things, and things like that, so that there's a balance, so you're not just sitting in an apartment by yourself, or you're not just like in, what people would think of as a nursing home environment. So yeah, I had a wonderful time. I met really good people. I'm still friends with them, especially Robert Kinjet. Hi, Robert. Talking about you. Yeah, he's my best friend, and he's all over YouTube, so I'm sure if you type in his name, you'll find him, and he's an awesome journalist and writer and activist, and he's just a great friend. So yeah, I lived there, like I said, from 2012 to 2013. Oh, great, background noise. Anyway, and I did a lot of things there. I helped run a women's choir. I was the director's assistant. I helped run a women's group with interns. I worked a lot with the interns on how to better services, social services. I gave them ideas on that. I worked with the activities director, who really needed help and direction. She honestly doesn't really have a degree in activities therapy or anything along those lines, and she came as a volunteer, and she just has a disorganization issue, and so it was really good to work with her and help her out with suggesting new activities, with getting more volunteers. I would orient volunteers to Friedman and talk with them about why I came here, what I get out of it, and what I thought residents needed. I went to a couple of colleges to talk with psychology people about doing an internship under the social workers that were there and under the activities staff. I did a lot of online work promoting Friedman Place through writing to colleges and schools for the blind, talking to people. I also started my email list, Blind Mental Health, in 2012, and that keeps me busy. So I was doing a lot of stuff. I was doing a lot of stuff at Friedman that I really enjoyed. And like I said, I made a lot of friends. I liked a lot of the staff. There were only a few staff that I really didn't like. And it was really nice, like I said. And then I got the opportunity. We had a consultant come in, an organizational consultant named Leslie Ramick, and she might even be on YouTube. I know she's on LinkedIn. She was very good. I worked very closely with her on, she was looking at the organization overall and what was good about it, what needed changes, what were like threats or whatever, just different stuff. And she'd been an organizational consultant for years, and I helped her organize, meeting with different residents, meeting with staff, giving her as much information as possible to make decisions. A little while before I left, I think it was about a week or so, they announced that the executive director that had been there for 30 years or something and didn't really have any kind of degree or anything, and they really needed a new director, was retiring, and we were getting a new director, and we thought that was really going to change things for the better, and I think maybe it has. Unfortunately, right when he came in, I left. So I don't know, from November 13th on, I don't have the experience of living there as a resident. So I hear stuff from Robert, and I talk to him, and if anyone's interested in Friedman Place, obviously still write me, and I can talk to you about it. I still have a high opinion of it. And yeah, I would just be willing to talk to people about it in my experience. So my experience, on the surface, while I was doing all this stuff, right, I was doing, all this volunteering and organizing, and I also went to Trilogy Behavioral Health. I had a case manager there. I was doing PSR groups. I tried to find a therapist there. I tried to find a therapist at a couple of different counseling centers that had interns, and it really didn't work out. I was bouncing around to a couple different psychiatrists. There was one that was at St. Joseph's Outpatient, which I would not recommend. His name's Dr. Siamopoulos. Do not know how to spell it. He's Greek, and he doesn't seem to be even speaking English correctly sometimes, and we were totally on the different pages with medicine and stuff like that. He put me on Wellbutrin in March of 2013. Not 2013, of 2012. Yeah. Wait a minute. 13. Yeah, not March of 2013. Whatever. He put me on Wellbutrin at some point, and it was February. And it was great because it was a great antidepressant. I never tried it before. I was on Zoloft, and I needed something else. It wasn't really working. So Wellbutrin, the first few days, it made me kind of irritated and aggressive. I mean, not aggressive like I'm going to punch you out, but just irritable and but other than that, I didn't seem to have any side effects from it. It gave me a lot of energy and stuff like that. However, I did have a problem of forgetting to take my medicine. And even when they set it up so that I would go up to the nurse to get it, sometimes I would forget to go up to the nurse, and the nurse would forget to call me. And so sometimes I once I was taking half the dose of Zoloft that I needed, so we're well, no wonder this isn't working. Anyway, so it was fine, and then about 3 months later, it was a Saturday night in March, and I was looking on the internet for something, for probably Schools for the Blind or something, and I'd eaten dinner, and I was okay, but then I felt really weird, stomach upset, and just didn't feel very good and felt really weak, and then all of a sudden I felt really weak, and the next thing I knew, I had fell off the bed and woke up on the ground. And I was wow, I never experienced that before, and it was really emotional and, weird. I was really weak, but I recovered from it, and then I called my friend Jack, and I was hey, I just had a weird experience. And the nurses took my blood pressure, and it was wicked high. And I was really emotional after it, and nobody knew what had happened, and the system over there is kind of weird where the nurse left at like 9 at night, and there's no other nurse, and I guess the nurse called to talk to me about it at like 10 or 11, but the CNAs never told me, and the CNAs like did check on me every so often, but it was hard. I mean, like, they didn't speak English very well, and a couple of them were like talking in their own language while doing blood pressure and things like that, and I was like, okay, you want to talk to me in English, and it just, they're not nurses. So anyway, the next day I went up there to get my meds, and she was like, I think you should have gone to the hospital right away. She's like, this could have been a seizure and everything else like that. I was like, all right. I looked up seizure, and the description fit of like, all of a sudden feeling awful and then passing out or not remembering, and landing like in a weird position on the floor. Like, if I had just slipped off my bed, I would have, I think, been like, flopped over on my side or whatever, really close to the bed, but I had actually moved a fair distance away and was on my stomach. And so, yeah, and like the stuff that was in my pocket had like flung out of my pocket, and it was spread across the room or around me. But anyway, and I had a bite on the side of my tongue. I'd bitten the side of my tongue, and I'd heard that was a seizure thing. So anyway, I went to St. Francis Hospital, and it was my first time staying in the hospital. I stayed from Sunday to Wednesday, and it was pretty nice. The nurses were really, really nice. I had to have an EEG and an MRI, and everything turned out normal. One of the neurologists really wasn't that nice. They had asked me if there was anything remotely like it, and I said, well, yeah, sometimes when I don't eat, or if I get really hungry, I get really weak and like lightheaded and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I kind of felt that way before I, blacked out, but it wasn't like exactly the same. And this one neurologist that was like anxious to figure this out was like, oh, it was just fainting. I was like, well, I don't really think so. But anyway, they lowered my Wellbutrin dose. I didn't want to go off it completely because it worked so well for me, and it's really hard, as you guys know, to find a medication that works. So I kept going on it, and I was fine. I was fine in ways, like I didn't have any big issues like that, but I was, over the months, I was good. I still had depression daily, anxiety probably at least every day. I was having issues, but I just told myself, keep busy, don't let stuff get to you, don't dwell on stuff, and you'll be okay, which is what my parents and people have told me, and sort of like what the staff at Friedman was telling me, especially one of the nurses. She was a very nice lady, very good nurse, very nice person to talk to, but she's like, no, I don't think you need to be on meds. I think you need to, go exercise, go back to school, and I had tried talking to a blind services caseworker, and she was not very compassionate at all about mental illness and not very patient, and I sort of didn't really want to go back to school. I had thought that I could get technology and paratransit tickets and things like that from them, and apparently not. Apparently you have to have either a work goal or a school goal, and I'm learning from friends that they try to even push you into different types of work or different majors. And like I said, I was pretty much done with school when I graduated. I really didn't want to go to grad school or anything. And I tried even thinking about a paid internship. Made me like totally anxious. I was afraid of how was I going to present to people, and were they really going to think I was a competent person, and how could I keep up a good front of not showing my mental illness. And it just drove me crazy to the point I was like sobbing away in my caseworker's car from Trilogy. And so we're like, yeah, the little money I was going to get from that internship wasn't worth all that. So anyway, everyone was just telling me, you need to just keep going and everything else like that. So I was like, all right, fine. I'm going to do it this way. Everyone says it. Even some therapists say it. Think positive. This is how you talk yourself out of negative thoughts that come up. Everything else. So I was like, okay. I'm a psych graduate. This has some validity, I'm sure. So I'm going to try it. So whatever happened, I would just try to tell myself it's not that big a deal, and like not, sort of like rationalize myself out of it in ways. And this was like super torture for me because I'm like a wicked sensitive person and extremely emotional. So for me to tell myself, I had done a lot of that anyway growing up because I have a lot of issues with my family not accepting any kind of negative feelings at all. So I was basically told a lot through my life, and quite harshly, that negative feelings were not tolerated, and I was sort of punished for them in ways and stuff like that. But this was sort of me telling myself to just, get on with it. And but I also, to deal with the tension and stuff, I did self-injure quite a lot. With scratching, I never really bled. It was just scratches, using sharp things, paper clips, pipe cleaners, anything sharp, my nails. And so that's how I dealt with stuff, and I would hide it on long sleeves. Sometimes the nurses would see a scratch that was new, or I would show it to them because it did hurt and it was like not going away maybe. I never had like any infections, but they would say, they would be like, oh, how did you get that? I'm like, oh, I just scraped my arm or something. I think that nurse I was telling you about that was really good but didn't really understand, I think she understood by the night I left that like it was self-injury because I told her, and she's like, well, I suspected. But they would just clean it and they'd be like, well, it looks like a scratch burn, like, because the way I do it, like how the skin comes off, it looks like I have a burn, but it's not. I don't like break through layers of skin to like actually cut or make a deep scratch. They're long, but they look kind of ugly. Not as ugly as actual cuts, but they have stages of healing, and people that know me can see how far along they're healed and stuff. But anyway, I did that a lot to release tension and to deal with feelings, because whenever I wanted to like cry or get anxious, I almost wouldn't even want to let myself do that with myself because I was afraid it would send me into depression. But I was nevertheless still depressed. I would not be able to meet, to be able to go to Trilogy sometimes because I just couldn't get out of bed. I preferred staying in my room, but there was a stretch of months, I'd say throughout the summer, where I was extremely busy, and I just kept myself busy, and it was, I just got busier and busier, and just tried to say, okay, I'm going to just keep doing this. And I tried to find, like I said, a therapist. It didn't really work out. I had attached to this one therapist very well from Massachusetts, and I just was having trouble finding anything else. So, around October, I was planning on going back to Massachusetts to see my family, and this was going to be a big deal because I hadn't seen them since they left me in June 2012, and this was October 2013, so it was, way, like I said, a year and a half almost. So I was really nervous about this visit for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to go into, but, family stuff that's gone on that's been hard, going back to see how that's going, their acceptance of my depression and mental illness, which was still there, obviously, just a lot of things built up in my mind, but I didn't really talk to anybody about it, again, because I was like, well, I don't want to go there. At this point it was like, stuffed everything in so bad I didn't want to open the door because everything would like fall on my head, I couldn't do it. So I continued to be really busy and ended up not seeing Dr. Simopoulos anymore. I mean, I fired him. I had someone call his office and be like, you know what, you are not working with me anymore. So I was seeing this Dr. Carbonell, who goes to Friedman, and I told him I was very, very tired, very depressed. I didn't tell him everything, like he didn't know about the self-injury. A lot of psychiatrists didn't know about it, or therapists, but anyway, because it was like off and on. But he said, okay, we'll raise your Zoloft. So I think I was at 75 milligrams, and he raised me to 100 milligrams. I had been on Zoloft for 2 years, from 18 to 20, but then I hadn't been on it again for a few more years, and I never was up to 100 milligrams. But I said, okay, I'll take it. And of course, that skeptical nurse on meds is like, are you sure you want to take this? I'm like, yes, I do. So on November 10th, November 10th, I remember that day very clearly. I was doing good. I did a volunteer orientation with a new volunteer. I went and had lunch. I came up from lunch, and I was working on finding a list of group homes for a friend, and I was looking at stuff, and then again I felt really weak and really weird about an hour after I'd eaten, and it was not due to low blood sugar because I had just eaten, and that's what I tried to tell that other neurologist. I was like, how can it be something to do with, hypoglycemia, not eating, because I just ate both times I had the seizure. So about an hour after, I felt really bad, my stomach and just everything. So I said, I'll go to the bathroom and see if I feel better. So I remember sitting on the toilet and being like wicked dizzy. I don't remember ever like having bowel problems. I didn't like have diarrhea or anything. I just remember sitting on the toilet being wicked dizzy, and then waking up on the ground, stretched out, like I said, in a weird position for someone that just fell. So it's almost like I did move while I was blacked out, but woke up on the ground in the bathroom floor, like I said, sort of facing the tub, and the toilet faces the doorway. So I had moved, and just laying on the ground, extremely weak, extremely out of it, just totally confused, and didn't really understand what was going on for a while. I hadn't bitten my tongue, but I was, like I said, very, very, very confused and very, like I said, weak. And it was to the point where earlier that day, I remember clearly, we had a power failure. Generator didn't work or something. And I contacted my friend Jack about it, and he had left me a message on I had a home phone answer machine, and so he had left a message while I was laying on the ground, and he's like, "Hey Sammy, it's Jack, blah 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 blah." He starts talking about this power failure thing, and this and that and the other, and this person was doing. I'm like, who is this person, and what are they talking about? Why are they talking to me? So it took me a while to even know what was going on, but eventually I was able to crawl out of the bathroom and get up, and I actually walked myself up to the nurse's station. I mean, they have call lights and stuff, but they don't. I don't think people would go to them very quickly because there aren't very many CNAs. Sometimes they're not even on the floor. So I didn't want to pull my call light, so I just walked upstairs to the nurse's station, and I was like, I think I just had a seizure. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah. And they did my blood pressure, and again, it was wicked high. And then they called the medics and stuff like that. They called medic transport. They didn't call 911. But they brought me over there, and a weird thing that happened that didn't happen before was that I was extremely emotional, just crying all the time, and just couldn't get myself together. And I remember being at the hospital and trying to tell them the story and thinking, well, at least they could find my other records, because I was just there in March, and they never really found the records. So I told them the story, and they basically just tried to tell me it was fainting again. And I was like, it's not fainting. This was really weird. I mean, I totally blacked out. I woke up and I was totally confused. It was just not normal. So, but meanwhile, I was sobbing away. And so the nurse called me, and I'm sobbing away on the phone, and she was like, did they get a social worker to talk to you? I was like, no. And she could hear a doctor in the background, and she's like, that doctor was right there. She was like, I know, they said the social worker just left. And so she wasn't happy at all. And so they came to get me, and the oddest thing happened. When they came to get me, and by the time I got home, I remember I didn't even ride in an ambulance. I rode in somebody's car. And I had my stuff in this Medicar's van. And I remember sitting there, and as calmly as you please, and as clear as day, I had the thoughts and feelings that I wanted to kill myself, and that was perfectly okay with me. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't freaked out. It's the whole thoughts and plan and everything just was given to me from outside of me and brought into my head and made complete sense, and I was just very peaceful. I thought I wanted that peacefulness that I had when I blacked out earlier that day, and I was just really calm, and it was just the weirdest experience I ever had, because my mom talked a lot about suicide and killing herself and wishing she was dead, and I think a lot of it might have been real. I mean, she was very, very depressed, and drinking alcohol doesn't help. But I think some of it was attention seeking. And I never, ever had considered suicide as any kind of an option before. And so for me to have those thoughts was so out of character. And just so like nothing I'd ever experienced. But again, it was okay. Like I said, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't upset. I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to know, obviously. And I just was good with it. I was still very emotional when I came back upstairs and saw Bridget, and I was sort of crying. She was like, oh, well, we'll get you therapy and this and that. The nurse, Bridget, that was the one that I keep talking about. She's like, we'll get you therapy and everything. And she was like, everything is going to be all right. And like singing and, you know. Then she left, and I got changed into my pajamas, and you know, I sort of knew what I was going to do. I thought I would break glass and cut my arms with the glass and black out really quickly and die. That's what I thought. And I'd never done this before, and I don't know anything about like your body and blood loss and whatever. I just assumed this would work and that it wouldn't really be that painful, because as soon as I started bleeding, I would get really dizzy, and then I would black out, which is, you know, when I had a blood test a couple times, that's what happened. I would like, you know, I would just get dizzy from blood loss. I figured if I really cut myself badly enough, you know, that would happen, and I would just black out. So there was another resident down the hall that was going to the hospital, and Bridget and a CNA who happened to be a psych tech or something at another facility like Albany, I believe, was there. And I had a picture frame, took the picture out, and went over to my little kitchen area that has a hard linoleum floor and threw it on the ground. And it went, smash! And I've heard glass break before, but I've never like broken something. So I didn't know it was going to make that loud noise. And I was like, wow. And of course, they heard it, and they were right outside the door. So I ran over, and I reached down really carefully, because I didn't want to cut myself right away, to find a piece of glass to save. And the person opened my door, and because it wasn't locked. I didn't think about that at the time. But they could have gotten it anyway. They have keys. And I remember the guy going, are you crazy? You could hurt yourself with that. I'm like, yeah, right. So he took it away, and they came and swept up the glass. And in that moment, I knew I was in trouble, because there was nothing else I could do. And they didn't know yet what this was, you know, that I was being suicidal. And they had left the room for a while, but they were going to come back. So I suppose I could have done something, but I think I knew that like I had been caught out, and whatever I did was going to be, by the time anything started, people would have come back, so it would be destroyed. So I had scratched myself with a paperclip and just lay there and was like, oh my god, now what? So she comes back, and I tell her how I'm feeling, and she's like, okay, well, we're going to have to get you inpatient and everything. That's when she saw my scratches, and she's like, well, I suspected it was self-inflicted, but again, she doesn't know anything really about it, and they don't know anything really about it, and that's kind of where in the back of my mind I was like, okay, these people like don't really know about mental illness, unfortunately. As nice as they are, and you know, social worker's nice, but he's not a therapist. Psychiatrist hardly comes. It's just not a place for anyone with any kind of ongoing chronic depression, anxiety, whatever. So I sat there on my computer and listened to YouTube, and Jay sat by the door and was my watcher guy. So I think that's what I'm going to leave off now, because this is turning into a really long video. So this is like part 1 describing life at Friedman before my breakdown, and then what happened that night. So I will do part 2 next.
My web stop.